Okay. All right, everyone, thank you so much for attending. Let's dive into this presentation and interactive screen talk on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Then I'm going to go like this. And all right, so let's start by talking about genre. I like to start out with a non sequitur. So when I graduated college, I went to New Orleans for 6 weeks to help with Hurricane Katrina, and when I came back, I saw that Wynton Marsalis who's maybe the second greatest jazz trumpeter after Louis Armstrong was doing something in DC. I thought he was going to give a jazz concert. He's a New Orleans spokesman and famous native son, but he actually was in a synagogue and just talking about jazz. And I was like, oh, is he not going to play anything? But what actually happened was he was very interesting. He was very articulate. And during the Q&A section, someone came up in line. I have Bill Cobbs from Sunshine State, which he's a character actor. He was in the Sunshine State movie that we all watched. Because he looked a lot like Bill Cobbs. He was just this old wise black man, and who he went up and said, "I have been in all the preservation halls, and I've been playing on the streets all the time, and I even have a master's dissertation in jazz." And I think jazz has lost his way, and everyone was groaning because he was trying to like think that he knew more than Wynton Marsalis or whatever. And he was saying, because jazz has lost form. And Wynton Marsalis very articulately said, I'm going to give you a very honest answer to that. You asked a very good question. Basically, the way Wynton Marsalis put it is that form is the rules of the game. Form is we're going to play basketball and we have to mutually agree to dribble, or else what's the point? We're going to have to mutually agree over where the out of bounds, inbounds is. Um, Otherwise, if you want to play with me, it's obviously going to be free. It's going to be free form. It's going to be artistic, but we have to have rules of the game. So genre, I think, is the idea of the rules of the game. We film along certain conventions because structure is fun and fulfilling. When I say that, I mean people like Quentin Tarantino, the Coen brothers, Robert Altman's another example. They say, I want to make a war movie. I want to make a film noir. I want to make a Western. Um, and as for us, we watch films along certain conventions because we want to see how an artistic personality, we want to see each person's different take on those conventions. Another example is the 48-hour film festival. I've done a couple, I don't know, they usually have three guidelines, like you have to have one character who does this, you have to have this line in your movie, and you have to set it in this location. And like all these teams scramble to try to like film something in 48 hours that uses those three things. So like I think we like rules because of that. And now I open it up to the floor. Why is genre important? Why, for example, do we have so many vampire movies but so much fewer movies about flying squirrels? Or why do you have so many more movies set in the Wild West than we do in like Rhode Island? Let's take it to the floor. And let's try to keep shares for 2 minutes. There's no raising hand, so go for it. The question is about genre.
Answering why we think genre
Why
is.
is genre a thing? Why are we drawn to genres? Why do we make films in certain genre conventions? Why are there so many outer space movies? Why are there so many movies that are in the Wild West? Why are there so?
I don't know. Could it have something to do with archetypes?
Yeah, and I guess I'm also thinking that it doesn't feel like this is something that's really restricted to movies or stories even. I mean, anywhere in, I think, any artistic endeavor is going to have kind of a clustering. And I think one of the big reasons probably is just sort of an aspect of art thrives on community, I think, where people can trade and discuss. And for that to happen, you do have to have some kind of a center of sorts. Um, you know, and I guess also people are drawn to certain features, right? So um, certainly people love particular genres. Um, yeah, I guess that probably does go to archetypes that people resonate with.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's both. I like what you said about community because having shared interests creates community, and if you're drawn to the same things and they focus around a genre, and then there's certain like conventions and rules that so shared symbolic language that it creates. Well, language is symbols, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd also add that there are certain themes that genres often touch on. I mean, the Western um, will touch on, law and order versus, anarchy, for instance. And, film noir will touch on, the role of fate and, man being punished for his sins. And I think those can intrigue people if the film is done well.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to the next thing. Is this still being shown?
Yeah, we see
Yeah,
it.
we can see it.
Okay. Now here's the other end of genre is that genre is it does sound lame to quote books from my film education in college years ago, but one of them said that I took a course on genre. One said that a genre is the most feedback oriented system that Hollywood has, and that people vote for what they want to see with their box office gross is. So if they want a lot of westerns, then you see a lot of westerns. Or if they want a lot of family melodramas, if they want a lot of, biblical epics. So what I think is absolutely interesting, and people might not know this, but in the 1950s when my dad was coming of age, there was hundreds of films. I believe there was a high of like 134 or 140. You could click on that link. There was up to 130 Western films a year in the movie theaters. He said that he would go to the Western. My dad would sometimes go to the Western and he would just see a double feature, so two different films every week or whatever. He went. Um, that is a lot of redundancy. Right now we are having, and that can be pretty bad for creativity. Right now we are in a crisis. Adam Spector has talked about in his film group, but Martin Scorsese in 2019 he published an article where he bashed the superhero genre. I know that Carla, who was our friend of the film club, Carla loves the superhero genre. And so I invite her to also weigh in on the debate. But he said that it was akin to superhero rides, and that it lacked the imprint of the filmmaker. His article is behind a paywall of the New York Times. I read it, but I couldn't share it, perhaps. But Guillermo del Toro, Francis Ford Coppola, Paul Thomas Anderson, all of great filmmakers agreed. And the tough thing is that Martin Scorsese is a very complimentary filmmaker. If you read that TCM column, he has nice things to say about all of his peers all the time. I don't know how he and say James Mangold or Taika Waititi, who are great filmmakers too, might share a table at the Golden Globes the next year or something if they're like, yeah, Thor was really bad, but um also, so if you polled 100 of the best of 100 movie critics, they might say any of these four names are the best director working today. Another name for a person who is the best director working today, some people might say is Alfonso Cuarón. In 2013, he released a film called Gravity. It won him the best director, a very revolutionary film. It was the seventh highest grossing film of the year, and the highest grossing film that was not based on a franchise. In 2018, just 5 years later, he released Roma. It won the best directed film of the year. But what was its box office grossing total? It was nothing because the film was consigned to Netflix. Probably because it was just not a genre picture. It was about a picture about growing up in Rome. No, sorry, Mexico City, the Roma neighborhood of Mexico City. But in this case, genre can be very stifling. Thoughts?
Guillermo del Toro did make genre movies. He still makes genre movies, so I don't understand why he's actually why that, he's made a film noir. He's made a horror film. I mean, he's made tons of horror films. I mean, and his two superhero movies are still considered one of the best. You have Hellboy and Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. I think Martin Scorsese is just too full of himself, and I think everything he's done since The Departed has sucked. And it sucked the life out of me. I know that for a fact.
I
Like,
love that opinion. I love that opinion. No, because I think I have said it, Adam, there's a hagiocracy around Martin Scorsese, but personally, I like Killers of the Flower Moon enough to redeem the films that I didn't like after Departed, but I also think it's irrelevant because even the genres that Guillermo del Toro dabbles in, they're far more artistically literate, in my opinion, than superhero movies.
well,
Superhero
Hellboy
movies,
was a superhero movie.
I think they're the most risk averse. I guess what you can say is that genres, because they're so democratic, they're capable of being very risk averse.
Yeah, well, Guillermo del Toro actually made Hellboy before the superhero craze, like before Marvel hit it big with Iron Man. He actually made it right after they made the Hulk, the one with Eric Bana. So, and it grossed really well. And you're right, he did stylize it to make it look more of a horror film rather than a superhero movie. But it's the same, it's in the same vein. And now there's a new Hellboy movie coming out that actually they did it bare bones, and it looks like it was really shoddily done with, like, maybe I think $3 million. But Mike Mignola, the guy who created Hellboy, has said, "Oh no, this is it. I absolutely love this new iteration." So
I'm not convinced that I like a film according to what genre it is. I I just took a look at a list I have on my computer of my 100 favorite films, and um, there's no consistent genres, and the things that, in some sense, I can fit into a genre. Often they're things that seem at first to be fit into a genre and then go off somewhere else. I'm not claiming this is whatever how everyone feels, but it's certainly not true universally that people decide what they like according to what genre it is.
I mean, I don't think, I'm a huge fan of Martin Scorsese, and I agree with 95% of what he says, but I didn't agree with him on his, I think that superhero films are like any other genre. They're good examples and they're bad examples. I agree that there's been too much, but I don't think a genre is inherently positive or negative. It depends on how it's done, how you use the theme, the trappings of the genre to tell a story. Is it oversaturated? I mean, westerns are oversaturated at one point, and superhero movies have been recently, and there's kind of been a pullback from that. So again, it's just, who's making it, what are they trying to say? What sort of skill and craft do they use? Um, but you can, are they having, you know, are they following the genre rigidly, or are they, having fun with it, or, subverting it?
I think Todd had his hand up raised a little bit ago. Todd, did you want to
Yeah.
talk?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, this is very much aligned, I think, with what several of you were saying, but I think, it's looking at a symptom and not at, what is the underlying problem, right? And the underlying problem is something that just is part of the world and part of art, and that is, there's a commercial element, and there are things that become popular. And if a genre happens to become popular, then there's going to be more made, because that is the thing that those who want to make money making the movies are going to go to, and then it's going to get oversaturated, and there's going to still be some good instances, but a lot more uninspired instances. So it doesn't, to me, make sense, right, to look at a specific genre or say there's too many of X, Y, or Z, right? It comes back to the fact that you've got the driving force of why there's so much of this stuff and why people are feeling like it's not good, is there's some folks that want to make money, and that's sort of the low-hanging fruit for them at that time. I will note, though, I think that there's like that's not the only issue. Sometimes also just there are other things that go wrong, and I think in the case of Thor: Love and Thunder, I don't think that you can say that Taika Waititi doesn't care or want to make something good. I think there are other issues there, and I think at some point maybe it'd be interesting to kind of look at those cases where it wasn't the money may have been part of the problem, right? But that wasn't, there are other things going on behind the scenes that made something that you were expecting to be great because you had someone really good behind the helm or on the helm. Something didn't work out. Anyway, yeah, thanks.
Actually,
also, I want to piggyback on that real quick. You actually said something that really I liked Thor: Love
let's
and Thunder. I
pause
thought
for a
it was
second.
good.
We got a new person in the chat named Tisha Agee, who I do not know. Just if the young person wants to introduce themselves. Tisha Agee. Hello?
Warren, I'd like to hear what Doug was saying.
Hold on a sec. I just don't remember inviting this person. I'm very delighted for a new person to come along. All right. Well, welcome to Tisha. Douglas, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like Thor: Love and Thunder, but I know that there was some problems with it. They had really good actors, really good. I like the story premise of it too, because it came directly from a storyline in the comics. But I think that this is what happened with Kevin Feige. I don't know how to spell or say his name right, but he's really, he is the mastermind behind all the Marvel films. So when he gets his fingers in something and he'll tell, like sometimes he'll let a director go, but it seemed like with that one, he was trying to rein in Taika and just keep it on a narrow, straight and narrow. But if you look at everything Taika Waititi's done in the last 2 years, I mean, and since Thor: Love and Thunder, I mean, he's had like 4 television shows, all produced by him, and a couple of them starring him. 2 other movies that were produced and like made to go to the Oscars, and it's just he had so much on his plate that I'm pretty sure like he kind of like let it go by the wayside. But I thought it was fine. It was like I call all the Marvel movies, they're popcorn movies. You watch them and you can throw them away. Like once you're done with it, if you want to go back and watch it, you can. Unlike the art films that a lot of us do like, we go back and rewatch those. And even I find myself, like I said, I think in the last one, rewatching old movies from the 80s and 90s more so than I watch movies from the 2000s.
Okay. We are running a bit on time, but I think you all made some great points. I think to clarify on what Martin Scorsese said, it's the idea that superhero films, he thinks that it's not a clear correlation of supply and demand. It's not that people are voting with their box office dollars for superhero films. They're only being shown superhero films. So, it's a kind of a skewed set of choices. Because, I mean, again, Roma and a bunch of stuff like the romantic comedy, that's not even in the theater anymore. So it's hard to, have a clear playing field. As far as Guillermo del Toro, I believe he's just against like a saturation rather than like there's no room for superhero stories. Let us go back to talking about Noir. We might, oh, no, actually, we're going to talk about Robert Zemeckis. Basically, because we're talking about genre, it's important to note Robert Zemeckis is the director of this movie, as well as the director of Back to the Future and Romancing the Stone. So he was having a pretty hot decade here. The movie was also produced by Steven Spielberg, and I have a feeling Spielberg was probably a bit more hands-on than the average producer might have been. Although if someone knows, please type it in the comments. I did not have time to look up everything. He didn't just combine 2 genres, which is pretty cool, but he resurrected 2 dead genres. Film noir was primarily in the 40s and 50s. There were specks of it, like The Long Goodbye in Chinatown, but it wasn't really, and I think Brian De Palma did a couple in the 80s. And then animation, the golden age of animation was primarily 1930 to the end of the studio system. Animation was originally created as a way to keep the audience there during double features, triple features. That was a very common practice. So they would have travel reels, news reels, and they would create animations and animated shorts. And then Zemeckis didn't. So yeah. So it must have been amazing to watch this film in 1988, and therefore we will go to our resident AAP member. I'm just joking. Adam is not. In fact, there are two people here who might be older than Adam. I didn't ask, but Adam was old enough to see the theater, so I asked Adam to share his thoughts as well as Doug shared his thoughts. But let's just turn to Adam. And Adam, I gave you 3 minutes to talk about what was it like to watch this film in 1988.
Well, yeah, thank you for that introduction. Made me seem like I was 85, but seeing it in the theater was it was really exciting. I mean, I think for people now who are used to seeing, CGI there, it may not seem like that much, but people left the theater in 1988 thinking, how the hell did they do that? I mean, there had never been that type of sustained use of animation and that type of interact. There'd been scenes here or there, like in Mary Poppins, but there had never been that type of interaction between humans and cartoon characters. And it helped kind of reawaken a love for the classic Disney and Warner Brothers cartoons. What I was a teenager then and I hadn't seen a lot of noir films, but now as an adult, I can see how it uses some of the noir archetypes very well, has some fun with it. But people, it was a huge risk, but people, both critics and the public in 1988 really responded to it. Um, you know, and it was actually fun. I hadn't seen it since it was in theaters, and it was fun going back and revisiting it. I think I could appreciate it. Um, I also went back. I watched the making of DVD, and that kind of opened a whole new level of appreciation for me.
Okay, thank you, Adam, for that share. Now let's talk about film noir. Adam is also an expert on film noir because he saw the film noir festival. He actually, so we might refer to him for some credits. Film noir is the kind of dark detective genre. It is two things, but let's see. Nino Frank, so it was credited by a French film critic. It was created by a few different factors. People were seeing the darker side of humanity during Depression and World War II. Films were overly bubbly during World War II, and there was a need to get around the code. Everyone knows about the code because we talked about it last time, which censored films, and the code frustrated many. When I talk about the films were bubbly, there was a number of films like Mrs. Miniver and Meet Me in St. Louis, which is, I have a little clip of up there. I couldn't figure out how to integrate YouTube videos into a slideshow presentation. I think we're behind time, but these were films that showed a very pleasant life about America and Great Britain abroad to show what we were fighting for. And so, like, there was definitely a very disconnect between movies and maybe certain elements of the national mood. Also, like Sergeant York, most like positive, aw shucksy war film you'll ever see was in 1941. So Noir was a marriage of two things. First, there were the pulp detective novels. There was the hard-drinking novelist, often as deranged as the people he was they were tracking down. Subject-verb agreement was not working my way that time. I typed this up really fast. I apologize. It was written by some people whose names are below, and that is the Maltese Falcon on the left, and that is a shot of Bob Hoskins in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as you see over there. There's that, and these detective novels were American inventions. Then you have the German trained directors. Now, if you're thinking that this was because the Germans were coming from the war and they were really had dark spirits because of that, it's kind of partly that, but it's actually because the Germans had a thriving industry called UFA. Alfred Hitchcock got trained there. Billy Wilder, Fritz Lang, Otto Preminger. Otto Preminger, you might know as Mr. Freeze in the '60s Batman, and he was apparently the biggest asshole on set. So that's a fun fact. Edward Dmytryk, and But also was interesting was also there were visa issues with these people. All this immigrant stuff is quite relevant. It says in that thing, California was paradise, but its distance was precarious, always a visa stamp away from perdition. So, and for some of these people, they might get shipped back to Nazi Germany if people aren't happy with them. Although Billy Wilder was Austrian, Otto Preminger was, someone could look that up. I think he was Austrian, but I am not sure. But Austria was part of Germany anyway, so whatever. I think, but I mean, some of them came from different parts of the world, different parts of Europe. But I mean, a lot of them, even the ones a lot of them got trained in Germany. That was like the center of the film industry. And Germany didn't have the advantage of California of being sunny and having such great ranges. Part of the advantage of Southern California was that there were mountains and coasts and all these places to film. So in Germany, they filmed things indoors. And there's these famous films like M, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and Metropolis are some of the main films, and they're very kind of like spooky and stuff like that. The films were okay. The films were we talked about that. So we talked about this. They were unpopular among the establishment. Here's an essay that says the picture is a morbid, steamy. This was on Scarlet Street, which was directed by Fritz Lang, he directed those above films in Germany. He directed a few big films in Hollywood when he came here, including Scarlet Street. And the character, and he said that, well, I don't know if you want me to read it out loud or you can read the quote. The picture is a morbid, steamy story dealing with the dregs of humanity. One of the abominations now and then may be accepted in the flow of entertainment offerings, but a cycle of the like would be disastrous. Well, he was in bad luck because in 1947 the number of noir films would like double, and like it would be such that it would be very ubiquitous, like superhero films like this. The film, and they also had a lot of problems with the censors. Postman Always Rings Twice is a 1946 film. It spent a decade trying to get past the code, trying to negotiate how to adapt the novel in a way that the censors would allow. So everyone, raise your hand if you've ever heard of a guy named Paul Schrader. All right, good. We got one. Two. Yep, the two that I assumed would be it. Paul Schrader is the director of he is the writer of Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Last Temptation of Christ. He also directed a film recently called First Reformed, which is really freaking awesome. He directed Affliction. He was also a film student, and he was a contributor to film publications and wrote a very hardcore book called Transcendental Style in Film, Ozu, Bresson, and Dreyer. And that's such a hardcore film that I personally don't even know who those three people are. So he wrote an article for the film something, and so that book, and I can give you a link to that chapter, but it talks about the 7 films of Noir, the 7 characters of Noir. The majority of scenes are lit for night. If it's a day, the shades are pulled down. Oblique and vertical lines are performed to horizontal. At one point with the Terry Gilliam talk, we talked about the Dutch angle where things are kind of curved. You also have Third Man where it's very famously like that. The actors in setting are often given equal lighting emphasis. I'm a little unclear about that. I have it up here, so I could potentially read it for you, or I can, I don't know. All right, Adam, what do you think the 4th one means? Or Doug?
Well, I think it's about it's not about the act of violence itself, although there's certainly violent acts that happen, but it's more about the tension of what might happen, something that,
Yeah.
kind of the sense of dread, the sense of danger that grows ever closer.
Okay, yeah, it says, I don't know if people can see this, but the faces are blacked out by shadow. Shadow effects are unlike the famous Warner Brothers lighting of the 30s, in which the central character was accentuated by heavy shadow. Also, the compositional tension is preferred to physical action, in which the typical film noir would rather move the scene cinematographically across the actor than have the actor control the scene by physical action. So oftentimes the actor is standing still and the camera is moving around it. But then again, then my favorite is there seems to be a Freudian attachment to water. The empty Noir streets are almost glistening with fresh evening rain, and the rate fall tends to increase in direct proportion to the drama. Docks and piers are second only to alleyways as the most popular rendezvous points. There's also a narrator, an unreliable narrator, often, and a complex chronological order. You're going backwards in time, or you're invited to sort of piece things together. So I guess perhaps we can invite you to talk about if Roger Rabbit followed these kinds of things. I thought this might be another good discussion segue. I'm seeing some yeses and I'm seeing some nos. So
Yeah, certainly it has, the story elements, often noir detective stories. It's a case that seems very simple at first, adultery, and then it gradually becomes this web, of something a lot deeper and a lot more complex. You have the femme fatale in Jessica Rabbit. You also have the pain of, he the heroes often have some sort of pain they're dealing with, in this case, that his brother was killed. So it definitely has those elements, but it also, it has fun with them.
I would say that film noir is stylistic, and the detective story came before film noir. Well, that will actually be in our next slide. So the elements of the hero's personality might not count here, but I might be overly being technical. In this article from the Hollywood Reporter, they say that one of the fun parlor games that film noir aficionados do more than any other film nerd, is to say, is this noir? Is this film noir? Is this not film noir? And there's that guy on TCM who's always saying a film that everyone would assume is noir is not noir. He's like, no, this is not noir. This is really not noir if you think about it, right? You know that guy, Adam?
You talking about Eddie Mueller?
Yeah, that's probably him. He's like the
Yeah,
resident in Europe.
he yeah, they call him the Czar of Noir. He runs the Film Noir Foundation that restores and celebrates noir films, and he also comes to DC once a year in October for the Noir Festival. So
Oh, that noir film. Yeah. Now remember, Adam actually did not go to the Middleburg Film Festival with me because they wanted to go to the Noir Film Festival instead. So my heart is still broken from that. But I hope you had a good time there. And
yes,
also, you better be able to prepare to talk about some good noir here. That's the expectation.
sure.
Um,
Watching the movie today, I picked up on some Easter eggs that actually I think not only Spielberg but Bob Zemeckis threw into it. When he goes into it, like the noir setting, when he goes into his office, he puts his hat on pretty much the Maltese Falcon. So at that point you kind of like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. And then you walk up and there's the two desks, and one's dusty and he hasn't touched it, and then that's when you see the pain, and he gets drunk, but then it circles like what you were saying, character stays still, but we circle the whole room to find out exactly what happened, and they're showing, not telling, exactly what had happened with him and his brother and all that stuff. And I actually think, I don't know if I was trying to figure it out. I think it might have been Bob Zemeckis in the pictures as his brother.
yeah.
And if it was, I was trying to be like, is that a young Bob Zemeckis? And I was trying to, like, I'm scratching my head, and I'm trying to think of what he looked like. And I was like, I didn't have time to look it up, but I was just like, it looked like him. So
Yeah, so anyway, Paul Schrader, yeah, his book is definitely a very dense, but I think a rewarding book to check out. Then wait, I had a thing. Ah, frick, I had a slide that I think is no longer here. But no. Oh, so where does noir start? Um, and that's kind of like the what's noir. So the idea of the detective who's as deranged as the person they're tracking down is a big theme, but I think that crosses over to a lot of literature. So, oh, Double Indemnity, I got the year wrong. That's 1944. So some people might say that Bob Inkster's Stranger in Paradise is a more obscure film. That might be it. There's also a film by Frank Tuttle that the Hollywood Reporter article I linked to, 1942 film, something about gun. The Gun for Hire, very starring Veronica Lake, who some people say might be the inspiration for Jessica Rabbit. Pretty minor. The Maltese Falcon, though, is one of the more famous films, but some people say that it wasn't until like, but that was directed by an American, John Huston, and it wasn't until I think the Germans really kind of got into Hollywood and started getting their own kind of way with it. That and so maybe some people might say it's this Gun for Hire or Double Indemnity, which is a film that Philip, I, and Ryan saw. So isn't that just wonderful that we were there at the birth of film noir? We got to experience that together. But I think the thing about Roger Rabbit is that it's not lit for day. It's not lit for night that much. There are scenes in broad daylight, which I would never see in a 50s movie. And so I think that we have to like look at some of the spin-offs of noir. There's Nordic noir, which is like Fargo, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Millennium. There's also like Blow the Man Down. There's neo-noir, which is The Long Goodbye, or Chinatown, and maybe there's Sun-Drenched Noir, which is like the recent thing, Florida Man. Let me try to think. I looked this up too a little bit earlier. But I don't know, Adam. I thought maybe you can talk about like the breakdown of noir, because I know you've used the term sun-drenched noir.
Yeah, I mean, from going, you meant from going to that film festival. I mean, there's many different types of noir. It's not always at night. It's not always in a back alley. I mean, a lot of them are, but yeah, there's noir that's set in the country. There's noir that, there's I saw a 3D noir film. And yeah, some purists, and I don't count myself a purist, can talk about whether or not it's really noir or not. But I think it's it's a lot more expansive. One thing that I learned is that in the 40s you had a lot of the light and shadow, the darkness, light and shadow that we talked about. Then when you start getting into the 50s, the studios started to think about, well, how is this going to play on television? So the films got progressively brighter so that people could see them later on what was generally a very small TV. So there's a lot more variety in noir than people might give it credit for.
I think I want to kind of turn it over to the audience a bit more. I know that it seems like Doug and me and Todd have talked a lot more. I think what's interesting to note is that I think Roger Rabbit is kind of noirish, except for the fact that it's not so dark. It's not as dark as I would assume it was, but it has the look of the detective. And I think it moved away from that because I think with Chinatown, I put it in the chat. The director, Rowan the director and the DP decided it would be more realistic to show to show Los Angeles as sunny, it is a sunny place. And Robert Town, the writer, thought that it would be like filled in red or something, that it would have like some darker filters. And that I think maybe just people started to think that it would be that Los Angeles should be portrayed as somewhat realistically. Let me go briefly over animation. So yeah, I mentioned that. Oh yeah, okay. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what the first animated film was? So at one point, the first animated film was actually European. They were actually doing full-length animated films and rather shorts. But Walt Disney said, I think I'm going to make a film, a whole film. And everyone laughed him at, but it turned out to be a very successful film. So is anyone curious to know like does anyone want to take a guess and impress me with their film knowledge of what the first major animated film was?
Yeah, I was gonna say Steamboat Willie too. I thought that's what everybody always credited as.
Steamboat Willie was a
Are you
who's that?
talking full-length feature?
Yeah.
I thought for us it was Snow White.
Yep, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yeah. It made like Gone with the Wind type money. Definitely a humongous hit. So Disney had Goofy, Mickey, Pluto, and Donald. Warner Brothers had a bunch of Foghorn, Daffy Duck, Looney, Bugs Bunny, all kinds of characters. And then were those the only two studios who had characters? Yes or no? What do people know?
I have
No,
a
I don't
question.
think so.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just like a more basic question about film noir. I
Oh,
mean,
sure. Go ahead. Good
I
idea.
mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
is it like maybe you said this at the beginning, but like someone else is wondering the same thing. Jenna Beth and myself.
Yeah.
Are always movies about crime and like solving crime, like detective work, that type of thing?
Um, Scarlet Street's not about that. And Detour's not about that. They're not. Detour is a famous film that doesn't involve a detective. So I've seen two that don't involve detectives or crime, but something bad happens in the movie. It's kind of about they're both about men who something bad happens, and it's like a dark. It's like a downfall of your life kind of thing. They're certainly not bright movies. Should I defer to Adam? Adam, do you want to chime in?
Are they mostly movies about crime? It seems that way.
I think that's accurate.
There's usually some sort of a criminal element, but no, they don't, detective stories can be a type of noir, but there's, many other types. So, for example, a common archetype is someone who's on the straight and narrow, works a 9 to 5 job, but is bored and gets tempted by a femme fatale to do something really wrong, and then thinks he can get away with it, but ends up paying the price. You see that many times. Um, but you have boxers that are pressured to throwing the fight. You have a lot of other it, that there can be a lot of variety. I mean, and I don't want to say there's always a criminal element, because I'm sure someone could find one where there isn't. But more often than not, yeah, it's some sort of crime, either seen, unseen, planned, or at least conceived of. So yeah, I mean, it's something you often see, but I wouldn't want to say film noir always has this, because there are examples that don't.
Would you say Dress to Kill is a noir or a psychological thriller? Because I'm kind of like it's both.
I think it has noir elements, and I'd say it has psychological thriller elements. I mean, um, but since Oren was talking a lot about Schrader, I think Taxi Driver, I wouldn't call it a pure noir film, but it certainly has a lot of noir elements.
I mean, the same thing could be
Um,
said about Blade Runner.
oh yeah, yeah, Blade Runner. In fact, I have a book about Blade Runner called Future Noir. Um,
Yeah, Schrader. I wonder if Schrader is like Robert Altman, Joel and Ethan Coen, Quentin Tarantino. He's explored a lot of genres in his writing and in his filmmaking.
There's
Although
two.
I am curious to know if Taxi Driver didn't seem to have as many Easter eggs as some of the work of like Quentin Tarantino and like the Coen brothers, who just like reference tons of like other films in their works. It seemed like kind of a very singular vision, but I might be mistaken.
Well, I've seen two of Schrader's films. One that probably nobody's ever seen, and it took place here in DC, but it was very similar to the first film that he was able to direct, which was American Gigolo. I think that was his first film that he was able to direct. But American Gigolo is definitely noir. Like you have this, man for hire for sex, and he's and I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, but then eventually he gets roped into this, he starts having an affair with this married woman who's like the governor's wife or something like that, and he ends up dead, and then there's like a whole, that's the whole premise. And but there's another film that came out, I think in like 2008-ish, 2010-ish, called The Walker, and it starred Woody Harrelson in a similar role that Gere played in American Gigolo, but it took place in DC, and this guy was what they called a walker. He was a gay man that walked around with all of the senators' wives and congressmen's wives and stuff, because they didn't want to be out alone. And what better than, to have a gay man with you to walk you through all the clothing stores and whatnot, so you could be seen. And and that was like the whole premise. And then, as Schrader films usually happen, somebody dies, and then Woody Harrelson's like, put on trial for it. So it's very interesting.
Sorry, we're behind on time a bit. But I only have one more slide, and then it's kind of pretty free for all about, the movie. So then you had, and Doug pointed this out, that shoot, what is this thing going on? Basically, there's a myth that like only two companies did animation, but that only two studios did animation, but is this open? Can people see the screen again?
Yes.
But actually, think about it. There's like Tom and Jerry, the mouse and cat. There's a character called Droopy that were with Metro Goldwyn Mayer. There was Betty Boop, who was a flapper. She's a 1920s flapper that was indirectly created, distributed by Paramount. And then Woody Woodpecker was from Universal, because and then even the ones that don't have ones that are famous today, they had stuff. They just might not have lasted through time. Like Columbia Pictures had something about a fox that I don't really recognize. And when it comes to kind of some of these, and the Betty Boop one was definitely, she's in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and she has some really funny dialogue that's very fitting about how she has to use work. She has to do like illicit work or work in a bar because, the color has changed, which is somewhat metaphorical for the silent era giving way to the sound era, and not all the people in the silent era making great sound-based actors because they didn't have the right voices to be loved by the public anymore. There are a lot of Easter eggs like that. Also, there are a lot of Easter eggs like that. If anyone else has any Easter eggs they recognize, or any kind of like really kind of interesting things they took away from the film, now's a great time to share.
I don't know if I'd call this an Easter egg, but just one thing. Mel, more trivia. Mel Blanc, who was kind of a legend in the cartoon circles, he was like the voice guy, did Bugs Bunny and a lot of the classic Warner Brothers films. This was actually I believe it was the last thing he ever did. I mean, he was already an old man by this, and he went and did Bugs Bunny and the Warner's ones, and then he died shortly thereafter. So for people who love the classic Warner Brothers cartoons, it's a pretty big deal.
Was anyone here a cartoon fan growing up of like Warner Brothers or Disney? I can't imagine. I don't think there was that much. I could see the thing with Donald and his nephews was kind of cute. I can't even remember that much of Mickey growing up, but that's just me personally.
I love Disney films growing up.
Like the Mickey Mouse stuff, or just like the Fantasia and Bambi and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
the old stuff too, but it kind of freaked me out, and this movie always freaked me out a little too. There's some stuff that, in terms of like the baby smoking the cigar as a kid, this is just really weird. You don't understand, like, but it reminded me of other stuff I'd seen at my grandma. I guess my grandmother had a bunch of VHS tapes of old stuff, so we used to put them on. There's always sort of an edge of like weirdness that freaked me out.
Oh, yeah, there is a kind of an interesting question about like what age range is the right range for this film. Because it does feel a little bit not like a kid's film. I did watch it when I was a kid too.
I'll be honest with you. I watched it as a kid, a few, like a lot, and then I didn't pick up on the fact that his brother was dead,
Yeah.
and that's why he hated tunes. I didn't pick up a lot on a lot of the adult themes in the movie. I only picked them. I'll be honest with you. I only picked them up today when I watched it again today for the first time in like 30 years. I was like blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this.
Yeah, me too. I watched it again last night and I was also like, oh, that's why I didn't get it before. I was a child and this is an adult movie. I don't know why my parents let me watch this.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. That's the balance. They balanced a little bit of kid humor with a lot of adult themes, and
Yeah.
that's why our parents were able to take us to it and we could watch it, and because it was like usually you just drop the kid off at the movie theater to watch the Disney movie. Actually, technically, when I was growing up, it was Don Bluth. Anything that Don Bluth did, we watched. Land Before Time and all that.
No, right, yeah.
So Disney wasn't a factor until 89 when
Yeah, this film, if I'm not mistaken, inspired the Disney Renaissance for a bit, inspired films to take more chances with animation. Also, Adam, Chuck Jones was also consulted on this film, who was big in those studios. It seemed, and the person who voiced Betty Boop and Olive Oil and Popeye voiced Betty Boop again in this film. So there were a lot of
Yeah,
people who I would imagine must have been very old who were in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
an Easter egg was the woman who voiced Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle. She voiced a few characters in there, and one of them was the woman that he mistakes for Jessica Rabbit, and she's chasing after him
Oh,
to Toontown.
that
That was
part I
that.
never understood, and I still don't understand. Like, is that a reference to something?
It's
That
a reference to just cartoons when people walk in and they think they're looking at it's that person, and it's the old red herring kind of thing.
oh,
Yeah, I don't think it
I get
was,
that.
that one was much deeper than that. I also just kind of brought the thought, not exactly an Easter egg, but just sort of an interesting point that, first of all, they saved some of the bigger characters for later in the movie. Right? You got Yosemite Sam early on, which was kind of a fun, like, oh, okay, who are we gonna actually see here? But then you've got both Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse together
Right.
interacting in a scene together. And I thought, I mean, I don't like specifically remember what I thought as a kid because I did see it when I was, I guess, 7. I'm pretty sure I saw it in the theater. Um, I think I remember the opening scene. That whole thing really just stuck with me. But that was kind of a fun thing. I was also frustrated though. I was like, here's our hero, and Bugs Bunny is gonna give him a spare tire. But I mean, it obviously fits the character perfectly.
Yeah. Um, Another thing, another Easter egg is the movie Limelight with the two silent heroes, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin on the piano. That's very much like the piano duel.
Oh.
Also, okay, when I talked about the Freudian attachment to water, I thought one of you was going to pick up on it, but that's like the dip. Remember?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't really think that. That's the
I think
only.
I think like water and Noir is pretty close enough, and like Noir, the dip is like a liquid. I don't know. That's what I was
I
thinking.
don't, I don't think it's connected enough personally. But.
but in
As for the Mickey and Bugs, that was because Warner Brothers said that they wouldn't agree to loan Bugs unless he had screen time equal to Mickey. So that's why they
Oh.
put him in the scene. We haven't heard much from Philip and Ryan, who apparently, like they did a little watch party. So, or I don't.
Well, if I might, kick off a conversation, in terms of my own experience with animation, I was more of a Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network kid. That was just the fact that I grew up in a different time. I'm, in terms of the late millennial generation. Um, that I don't think a lot of people in this group are. So happy to contribute my perspective. Ryan and we always enjoy these watch parties that we throw. Always a good time. And as I mentioned to Ryan, this was probably my second favorite movie involving animated and real life characters coming together. My first favorite, of course, being Space Jam. Um, but it's all very interesting. Um, we definitely appreciated the just the real tongue in cheek nature of the movie, albeit being one that I think the whole family could watch. And that's something that I really appreciate. It kind of reminds me of movies like Shrek, for example, having the kind of tongue-in-cheek adult humor. You know, it's a movie that everyone, that all generations can enjoy. You know, Roger Rabbit included. And yep, those are just my 2 cents in terms of my contribution to the group.
Did you find, Philip, that the movie would have been richer if you got some of the if you watched like as many noir films as Adam has watched in last year? Like if you went to the Noir Festival and picked up all those references, or do you think it was self-sustaining?
I think it's self-sustaining. You don't need to be, obviously, if you're a film noir fan, as Adam is, you can obviously take more from the movie and you can appreciate the movie more. However, just from a casual viewer, um, it doesn't get so bogged down and so heavy-handed in its film noir tropes that people can understand these things and people can be entertained. The common theater goer, such as myself, can be really entertained by this stuff. But it's as I said before, it's got things for everyone. Adam, as a film noir fan, can be entertained by the tropes, the film noir tropes, and how that's blended into the movie without it being so heavy-handed. So yeah.
All right. I don't know. Wendell, is there anywhere you want to take this conversation about the film?
And no, as I said toward the beginning, I think that uh, it's harder to define the genre of a film than you think. That often they combine bits of several things. I think that often the best films are ones that go off typical genres and into something else. I have a genre name which I don't think anybody else uses, which I call anti-romantic comedies. Those are movies that for much of the time seem to be romantic comedies. The company the couple meets cute, they get along fine, and then at the end they say no, this isn't going to work, and they break up. Uh, uh, the as a really obvious example of this is Casablanca. You think they're going to get together until the last couple of minutes, and they and one of them says, "No, we can't do this." So I'm just not real big into genres.
Yeah, I
Wendell,
thought
I
that
say
was
that
just a
was
way
awesome.
of talking about the film in terms of, I mean, the easiest way to define the film and what the major achievement of it was that he was able to revive and fuse two dead genres that couldn't go together, that who would have thought they could go together, like. And so I thought that was a good way to kind of go about it. What do you guys see as like the Spielbergian influence? I'm not sure if anyone has. It's a bit difficult even when you're reading like the basic literature to try to suss the division of creativity between producer and director. But it feels kind of Spielberg-esque, but also Robert Zemeckis. I don't know how many people are familiar with Robert Zemeckis' style and his filmography. Raise your hand. What about like Carla and Margaret and some of the people who are a little less
What can you say what else Bob Zemeckis has done? Because I've heard the name a bunch, but I don't know it by.
I can rattle them off real quick. Back to the Future 1, 2, 3. He also did the Polar Express, Beowulf,
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Did he do
Contact,
Castaway.
What Lies Beneath?
Castaway? Like,
The
think of
Wa-
all the Tom Hanks movies, and pretty much Bob Zemeckis almost directed all of them.
Oh,
Welcome to
Except for
Morrowind
Dick.
and Romancing the Stone was a humongous film. I would like to think that's a big film.
Oh, I love that film. Yeah.
That's a big. Did you see Romancing the Stone, Genevieve?
yeah. But I would say like a lot of these movies to me, they're just very quality. Like the
Yeah.
story like everything fits. They're very hard to criticize, maybe like not your cup of tea, but in terms of craftsmanship, I just love this one and all those other ones, most of the ones you mentioned. So
He loves playing around with technology and like finding like Polar Express. I believe that's also pretty advanced for its time in terms of animation and like CGI, if I'm not mistaken.
there's just like so much attention to detail too that I
Yeah.
really appreciate. This
This
like
was. Go
yeah.
ahead, Genevieve. I apologize. That was my fault.
That's okay. I just want to say I love the opening scene of this movie so much, and I had completely forgotten how captivating it is and how it just keeps going and going and going and going with all the shticks and everything you could imagine happening to poor Roger Rabbit, and the baby is, making its way through this obstacle course unscathed. It's just so perfect to me. So
Oh, that part. I thought you meant the part where the hard-drinking detective is walking by the Fantasia brooms and like
no, the
you're
very
seeing some pelican on a bike.
which is the movie they're making. Right? That's the opening scene.
Yeah.
It's just animation.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I thought the way, and then he said that you're not seeing stars or something like that,
Yeah.
which is
That's why they
interesting.
call the detective in, because
Yeah.
Roger Rabbit is failing as a actor.
Also, what's interesting is also that actually takes, it's the same plot of Chinatown, which is so very clever.
Hmm.
I don't know if people saw Chinatown. Raise your hand if you saw Chinatown. Show of hands from the, I guess, I don't know. Margaret and Carla, do you guys want to participate? I don't know. But if you saw Chinatown, it's the same idea of like the guy's hired to do one thing, then when he completes that job, he stays on the case despite no one wanting him to stay on the case.
Oh yeah, good point.
And then it's a fight about utilities, and it's something it's unsexy as water rights, and it's the streetcar and highways,
That's actually true.
Freeway.
That was actually
And a
true.
lot
They
of
put
this
that-
stuff,
the writers put that in there.
Oh.
and not only does it echo Chinatown, but these things actually happen. I mean, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, when freeways were being built, the city planners had to decide where they're going to be built, and they basically, what neighborhood would have to step aside or be destroyed in order to put the freeway through it. Now, they weren't going to do it through, in rich people's neighborhoods because they had political power. So they generally put it through the people that had the least political power, which is poor people, minorities, and they were the ones who got displaced in many cases for the freeways. Like, the Mexicans in LA. It happened to
It
them.
didn't stop. It continued all the way up until like even now, like because they'll displace people just to enlarge the freeways. And I laughed so hard when he said, "Oh, the freeway, there'll be never traffic again," and I was like,
Yeah.
This is the well, it actually is based on something called the streetcar conspiracy theory, in which General Motors and a bunch of petroleum companies bought stock into an anonymous company that bought a bunch of streetcar lines in LA, and then they dismantled them. You can certainly Google the 1947 conspiracy theory. Some of it's been debunked because the streetcars themselves were a little bit on their way down anyway, and they might have been torn apart. But certainly, it is a true chapter in history. This sort of like idea of buying the streetcar. Adams, I think you're talking a bit more of a general trend of city planners have to make decisions with highways. Do you understand the difference, Adam? I'm talking about like a specific chapter in history where they bought
Yeah,
the
yeah, I know you're
car
talking about a
secretly
specific thing,
to dismantle it.
but
Mm.
in many ways, I read an article, I forgot who wrote it, but it's very insightful. It said the tune, if you want to go a little deeper, the tunes are a minority and they have less power
Right.
than the people do, clearly, and they kind of have their own section. And the fact that their own section is in jeopardy shows kind of how little power they have in this fictional world that's being depicted. I mean, thankfully they got in the movie, they got the happy ending and but, as Doug was alluding to in real life, uh, the endings weren't so happy.
And I also I think it wasn't an accident that they had, the judge who bribed his way into office and then doesn't actually follow any real legal mechanisms and just, passes judgment and is the, judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah. Oh, is Todd gonna do another defund the police comparison? I don't know.
I mean, it just goes around with, it's just right in line with power imbalance, right? It's
Police overreach, yeah. Adam, actually, there is a lot of this is a really rich movie in terms of there's a lot of one great site I love to use along with filmsite.org or the TCM database is TV tropes. They have a section of wild mass guesses, and there's a lot of fan theories about this movie. This movie really lit up the fan theory board. There's all kinds of fan theories about how peak kids are made in this universe, about bordellos and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you could definitely spend your day on this thing. But you are correct. There's a lot of fan theories about the intersection of race. Sometimes, Adam, I do tend to call you out on whether you're making too many stretches in terms of if a movie's about race or not. But there are definitely a lot of people who agree with you about this one, about the sort of racial minorities. And that's also perhaps why Judge Doom has so much power as he has. Yeah. I would definitely encourage you guys to check out that TV tropes. What about you, Ryan? Do you want to add anything? I guess who else is here? Carrie, Phil, Carla, Margaret. I don't know if Carla saw the movie. And then there's someone here named. There is a mystery person here named.
I'm no longer on mute.
Are you off mute? Okay, Ryan. Do you have
I'm off mute. I'm talking to the Zoom people. Yeah, I first watched this movie like as a kid as well. There was one of the ones that we earned that we owned on a VHS. I'm not sure if anybody brought this up already, but it was based off of a book called "Who Censored Roger Rabbit." And and the author he did base the book's plot off of segregation and all, like in the all black clubs, and similar to how Spielberg made Jaws, where he bought out of Peter Benchley's copies of Jaws. He also bought up like all of the copies of Who Censored Roger Rabbit. So I guess so that way no one could compare the actual plots and know what's coming up next in the movie. And then just a fun little Easter egg, because directors so like to reveal like what movies they're gonna be making next. If you've ever seen Back to the Future Part 2, the scene where Marty goes into the 80s shop and he buys a sports like almanac, you can see a stuffed Roger Rabbit there.
Could you be a little more clear? A stuffed voucher of who?
Like So it's a stuffed animal in the shape of Roger Rabbit.
Oh, Roger
to
Rabbit.
indicate that he's going to be working on that movie next.
Can you clarify, did you read the whole book? And I was looking for someone to read to learn about the book, so I thank you for that.
I did not read the whole book, and like it wasn't available in my public library. But I am familiar with the book summary. Um, um, in the book, Jessica Rabbit really does not like Roger Rabbit, so there's no line about like I'll do anything for my husband. They don't have much of a romance, and then there's these things in the book called doppels, where the tunes create stunt doubles, and the stunt doubles only last for a few days, and so they use a stunt double if they're crushed by an anvil, or have to do something very dangerous. And so Roger Rabbit, he does get murdered, like in the book, and then before he gets killed, he creates a stunt double of himself, like a doppel, and then the doppel talks to the detective, to Eddie Valiant, throughout the book in order to clear Roger's name. And then the other thing that the tunes do in the book is they have speech bubbles. And so whenever they talk, a speech bubble appears and then it falls on the floor. And so everything is ordered with these speech bubbles. And some of the cartoons, like Jessica Rabbit, in order to appear more human, they suppress suppress their speech bubbles, and so and then similar to Judge Doom, you do have some human characters later on who are revealed to be tunes as well.
Okay. Okay. So, and what did you think of the movie, having heard of the book?
I feel that the animators did a phenomenal job making the movie, and I'm glad they cut out the speech bubbles because it would have been just too much. And I feel that making Jessica Rabbit a more likable person was a good decision because I mean you already had a despicable character in Judge Doom. You didn't really need another one. Um, um,
Did we also mention that this is the most expensive movie of the 80s?
Oh, and the author, Gary K. Wolf, he also liked the movie. He said, he said his book was portrayed well in the movie.
I see. Yeah, did we mention this is the most expensive movie of the 80s? Does that surprise
I believe
people?
it. Nope.
Yeah, that cast and crew list at the end, well, not the cast, the number of people involved was huge in multiple locations and just putting all that together.
I would think it would have been like Terminator or Blade Runner or something that involved like live explosions, you know?
And just not just the money, but the time. They spent a year in post production. I
Yeah.
mean, this was still, I mean, CGI was still in its infancy, but all the animation was hand drawn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it was
It
more
holds up so
difficult.
well.
Yeah, it was, they pointed out in the documentary, usually in an animated film, the camera doesn't move. But Zemeckis wanted to move the camera, so they had to adjust the way that they were drawing it to reflect that. And so, and the way they filmed it was fascinating. They had these rubber dolls that they kind of used as stand-ins so that the actors would have something for their eye line or something to hold.
Mhm.
they would do the scene with that, then take it away, do the scene just with air, and then of course fill it in later. And just
Oh.
seeing what Bob Hoskins had to do. I don't remember who won the Oscar that year. I think it was probably Dustin Hoffman for Rain Man, and nothing against Hoffman, but what Hoskins had to do was just incredible. And he
Mhm.
pulled it off so much that he made it seem easy, and it really wasn't.
Mm.
A couple interesting trivia points. Bob Hoskins said that for 2 weeks after seeing the movie, his young son wouldn't talk to him. When he asked why, his son said he couldn't believe his father would work with Bugs Bunny and not let him meet not let him meet him.
Aw.
Also, there was something about hanging the lamp that I thought was interesting. It does appear that Steven Spielberg was involved with the auditioning process. I'm just curious to know how much of a controlling producer he was, and like how much freedom Robert Zemeckis had, because Robert Zemeckis also mentored and interned with Steven Spielberg. You know, so like I don't know if he ever was like able to like break away and be like, I'm my own man on the set. You know.
Well, I think he was able to some degree, protect Zemeckis from from the Disney people who reportedly were getting very nervous, given that it did take a long time and there's so
Yeah.
much was involved.
Eisenberg wanted to like close it down.
Yeah. So the fact
But,
that that Spielberg, who had such a good box office track record, was vouching for him, kind of helped put the wolves at bay.
Well, that's good. But Robert Zemeckis also, Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future were also pretty high grossing, so I would imagine he would have had it. As long as Spielberg didn't like interfere with the movie, his vision, I think he probably was helpful. You're right.
Well, that's the fact that Zemeckis did Back to the Future and Romancing the Stone. That was the only way that they agreed to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because supposedly he had wanted to do it earlier, but he had just done some small films, and
well, no,
you
he
know,
had done Used Cars, and Used
Yeah,
Cars was like a flop. It's a cult favorite now, but like it flopped. Yeah, and so at that time they were like, no, we're not going to go with him, and so he
Yeah.
had to basically him and Bob Gale created Back to the Future, and then that's when they had their upkick. So
It's so another thing is that when Eddie takes Roger Rabbit into the back room at the bar where Dolores works to cut apart the handcuffs, the length from the ceiling is bumped and swinging. Lots of extra work was needed to make the shadows match between the actual room sets and animation. Today, the term bump the lamp is a term used by many Disney employees to refer to going that extra mile on an effect just to make it a little more special, even though most audiences members will never notice. Um, I thought that was interesting. So, like, this film is known for its level of perfectionism, you know?
Another interesting thing is that uh, Warner Brothers and Disney agreed that the their the number of scenes or minutes of scenes that contained each of their characters had to be exactly equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also noticed the level of detail in the dueling piano scenes where you see these reflections all in the piano of the cartoon characters. And I was like, how did they? Because the pianos weren't cartoons, right? The pianos were real. I'm like, how did they do that? I don't understand it.
That was another very meticulously done scene. Yeah.
Or how they wanted Jessica Rabbit's dress to shimmer. And that's
I
something
have to
I didn't
say,
notice. I didn't notice that the first time. And again, I think, Warren, as you said, it's going the extra mile. No one would have criticized the film if her dress hadn't shimmered or really made a big deal about it, but they wanted to just give it that little extra.
yeah, and
Or
it's meant to echo the 1952 film Limelight, where Charles Chaplin and Buster Keaton were well past their primes, and they were the two biggest comedians of the silent era, maybe next to Harold Lloyd, and they do a piano duel together in the movie. And it's the same thing of these two characters who are dueling to, you know. And then there are also big fan theories about that. Um, I also posted something about the rule of funny. If you guys ever heard of that, it's a TV trope that says that writers, whenever they if ever you get into a situation with complicated logic, you just go with what's funny. So it's like if it's funny, then you don't have to explain it with logic. The audience will just go with it.
Yeah.
So
That's
this is actually a movie where they any violation of continuity, logic, physics, or common sense is permissible if the results get enough of a laugh. This is the whole movie runs on rule of funny. I'll post it in the chat too. And it's even explicitly stated that his actions are that Roger the Rabbit's actions are he operates internally like his instincts are based on what's funny. He won't do things that won't make an audience laugh. And some people say that Judge Doom was designed to fail from the very beginning because it's more funny to have Judge Doom fail, and it's more funny to go through the scenes and to do long monologues and to be bombastic than it is for him to just kind of like shoot the heroes with a gun quietly offset. And like that's another one of the fan theories. But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Yeah, let's see what time it is. We are a bit over. So I think
right.
maybe it's time to do our kind of like what's your favorite your least favorite and least favorite.
Can I ask a quick question, Oren?
Yes, Jenna, Beth.
Before you were asking about what was the earliest feature-length animation, right? And were you asking about American only or?
Yeah, actually it was done in Europe before America. European films did do animation feature length.
Yeah, I
That's
think
one.
there were German ones that were first, and I thought that was an interesting connection that the film noir being inspired by German.
Yep, Germany had a very healthy film industry. Also, I think perhaps Russia, they had Battleship Potemkin.
Yeah. Okay, just wanted to check on that, what you were saying about the
All right.
animation.
Why don't I go first, and then when I do that, I'll time it so that gives a good thing of everyone. So I'll put my stopwatch on. Well, I'll just do this. Here we go. Okay, here's my best and worst. I did not like that chalkboard thing. When he scratched, they should put like a trigger warning because that's really bad for my ears when he like scratches the chalkboard. I think Jessica Rabbit had too much cleavage. I would be uncomfortable watching that with a kid. Like, that's a bit much. I think there was something else that I had in the bad section. Oh, I think Roger Rabbit wasn't as entertaining of a character as he could be. He's not as charming as Bugs Bunny. And best, I'm just gonna go with the one thing is that I love the scene where Eddie gets all funny and starts pogoing around. It reminds me of Singing in the Rain, when Gene Kelly does Singing in the Rain, and he's not being technically as amazing as the other numbers in that movie, but he's like splashing in the puddles and having so much fun. And it's just so unexpected. I've never seen you never seen this serious archetype have so much fun as he's doing, and it's just so joy-inducing for me. So that's about a minute. Who are we starting with? It looks like we're starting with Adam Spector. Favorite and least favorite things about this movie?
I think my favorite thing was, kind of retouching what I said before, is just the time and effort and the craftsmanship, throughout everyone, from everyone involved. I didn't really appreciate, certainly when I was a kid, what Bob Hoskins had to do a convincing performance. Or what all the animators had to do, and just or how much of a risk it was. There was no guarantee that this would be successful. So I think that's something that I really appreciate a lot more as an adult. Least favorite, I think not the film itself, but it's like a lot of attempts to do the same thing got progressively worse. Space Jam was amusing, not great. The second Space Jam movie sucked. And it's kind of gotten less special and there isn't the same thrill that there was in 1988.
All right, Ryan, what are your favorite and least favorite things about the movie? While waiting, Margaret, do you wanna? Okay, Todd, what are your least favorite and favorite things about the movie?
All right. Well, I don't really have a clear least favorite, so I'm going to go back to when I was a kid watching it, and the judge getting steamrolled freaked me out, and then I got even more freaked out when his eyes popped out and he became this screechy creature. In retrospect, I think it's great, but at the time, it was I was a scared little kid. There's a lot that I love. I think, as Adam pointed out, all the craft, the attention to detail, really enliven things. And one particular element that's a lot of times will bother me with a character, which is a character being really annoying, not doing stupid things. But in this case, Roger Rabbit, like it was motivated, and ultimately he was right a lot of the time. So I felt like that was well balanced.
That's a really good point, Todd. Actually, I agree with that. Margaret, are you there? Carrie, are you there?
So I
Ryan?
unmuted myself.
Ryan, are you? Well, we'll let Margaret go first because she just got to the computer.
Okay.
I don't know that I have much to add.
That's okay. Then we'll go back to Ryan. Ryan?
So this is one of my favorite movies. And I'm glad that we were able to watch it. In terms of least favorite parts, I'm not a big fan of the fake Jessica Rabbit. She's pretty ugly, and she's annoying, and it just stands out to a lot to the real Jessica Rabbit. And then my favorite scene, I really like the scene where the weasels, they just laugh themselves to death. It's like, that is so creative. It's like, and then you have the scene, right? And then you have Bob Hoskins, and he's breaking character, and it's like, wow. This is just so unique, and and I could probably watch that scene like every day and just be entertained by it. So, like, you just really made me think of Looney Tunes. And then I really appreciated all of the time and effort like that the animators put in there, and how they managed to secure all of the character rights. And the fact that Zemeckis is not going to remake Back to the Future, and he's not going to remake this movie either, and he's not going to let anybody else do it. Is like just a really good scene.
I apologize. I can't hear you perfectly. What's the scene with the weasels you mentioned?
Where they laugh themselves to death.
Oh yes, yes. That's the flip side of the scene I mentioned. But yes, that is.
Yeah, it was just so creative to see.
Huh, interesting. All right, Carrie, you there? Carrie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I need a second. You can skip me and go to somebody else.
We're just looking for favorite and least favorite moments. Do you still want to wait? Okay, let's. Wendell Wagner.
Go last.
It's been too long since I've seen it, so I don't think I can answer that question.
Well, I'm glad you came, Wendell, and I actually appreciate you were the first person to RSVP. That certainly helps me a lot. Oh, I do mention that, yeah, my biggest stress about running the group is the RSVPs, and like I only had 3 RSVPs up until 2 days ago.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's a way around that and how to,
Well, are we still sharing likes and dislikes?
yeah, I guess I was gonna wait for Carrie.
Well, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I guess you weren't next in the
Okay,
queue.
thanks. So my opinion you don't care. That's fine.
No, you're second to last, and then Doug's last. Carrie, you ready to go?
I thought isn't there like 2 people who haven't
No,
gone yet?
Carrie, I'm asking you to go next, please. You still get the same amount of time as everyone else.
Yeah, just because I'm trying to get around my device. That's why. Um. Yeah, I would say it was fun rewatching the movie. I I did not see it when it came out uh back in '88. But I saw it since sometime in the last half dozen years or so. And each time I kind of caught something different. It's
The least
I would
favorite and
say
favorite moments of the film, and you could, go on for that for a while.
one of my favorite things was and this is echoed by a lot of different people. Was especially after watching not just a movie but some of the behind the scene stuff is just the amount of time and workmanship and craftsmanship that went into producing a movie at a time when the technology was not what it is now. Was astounding. Actually, the DVD extra that I was watching about halfway through it was saying that it's something like 80,000 slides of animation went into the final product, which I don't know exactly what that translates to. I mean, how that compares to other movies, but I imagine it. They said that because it's more than usual. And the as my friend Greg, who I was watching with last night, pointed out, it's it's a standout movie in many ways, just in terms of being an animated film, but it's also a great whodunit. If you made this a pure live action film, the plot was very good. The references to actual events and pop culture, the freeways and the thinking that there's not going to be any traffic in the future and that kind of thing. Very sharp script, great acting by Bob Hoskins. All the voice work was pretty solid too. One thing I'd throw in real quick is that Kathleen Turner voiced Jessica Rabbit, and she went uncredited in the film. And I saw a funny link somewhere that she didn't want to be credited because the animated character she voiced was hotter than she was, so she kind of jokingly left her name off in protest. But she did it as a favor to Zemeckis because they worked together on the Romancing the Stone, etc. Least favorite, I think. Well, I throw in one more thing for favorite, which is this.
No, just go for least favorite. We have to wrap up. I'm sorry to be rude.
No, it's
I was
fine.
hoping you would. I was hoping you would speak earlier in the film, and then.
Well, yeah, that's I could not join the meeting I was at went longer than planned, so I was not able to dial in until about halfway through. So my
Well, just to
apologies.
keep it even for everyone, because everyone gets about a minute and a half.
Yeah. And then I just I was driving too, so I couldn't manipulate the phone while I was driving. So the my least favorite thing, actually, I wanted to see more of Jessica and Roger on screen together, and I know that's a minor quibble, but I thought that there's a lot of unsaid, unanswered questions about their romance, or how they got together, and why they. There's a scene where Jessica says that she likes him because he's funny, but doesn't really give a ton of information as to what makes them tick as a couple, and kind of wanted to see their interactions. Got a little at the end when they're in danger of losing their life there, but that's one thing that I kind of wanted more of. But beyond that, I don't really have that many quibbles. I think it's a really
Those are
strong
some
film.
very good points. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. And I think I agree with you about those things, about the relationship and such. Jenna Breath is not here anymore. Doug?
Oh, hey. I think things I liked. The script was great because I could, as a screenwriter, I could pick up on the things now that I didn't when I was a kid. Like the save the cat bit in the beginning was Bob Hoskins jumps on the back of the red car, and then there's a little kid running up that's friends are on there with him, and he's like, come on, and he grabs the kid and helps him up and puts him there. But then the thing I didn't like was at the end, and I mean, I thought it was funny, but I didn't like it so much, was when he gets off, he goes, thanks for the cigarette. I was like, okay. There was just a lot of smoking and stuff, and I get it, but there was a lot of product placement in that film that I never noticed before, and that's probably one of my big pet peeves. Is I didn't. They had Planters peanuts, like some sort of baked beans. They even like were showcasing Lucky Strikes, and I had to like go through my Rolodex in my head and go, oh yeah, this is when cigarettes were giving Hollywood a lot of money, so that way they could predominantly show them in scenes and stuff like that. Like the baby cigar, like it drops out of his mouth and there's a whole shot of it. There doesn't need to be a shot like a close up of a cigar, but there is. Like it doesn't make sense because I'm like, okay, well, is it a gun? Is it going to go off? No, it's it's a cigar. So but yeah, I think the smoking bothered me a bit, and I think that's probably why I became a smoker at 13. I quit when I was 25, but it's one of those things where I'm just